Right now, while everyone else is arguing about DPF filters and 7-year finance contracts on $80,000 plastic trucks, a completely different conversation is happening behind closed shed doors and at private auctions across this country. Cashed-up collectors are quietly, methodically, and with extreme urgency hunting down a specific group of Australian Utes. And they are paying numbers that would make your eyes water. We are talking genuine six-figure transactions for vehicles that were once used to cart sheep and building materials. If you have ever walked past one of these old girls rusting in a paddock and thought nothing of it, this video might be the most expensive thing you ever ignored. Number 10, Ford Falcon XL and XM Ute, 1962 to 1966. Most people, when they think about collectible Australian Utes, jump straight to the muscle car era, the big V8s, the aggressive body kits, the wide tyres, and look, we are going to get there. But the story of the Australian Ute as a collector's item has to start here, with the XL and XM Falcon Utes from the early 1960s, because without these vehicles none of the rest of it exists. The Falcon arrived in Australia in 1960 and changed everything, but it was the Ute variant introduced in 1962 with the XL series that completed the story. Ford understood something fundamental about the Australian buyer. They needed one vehicle that could take the family to church on Sunday morning and carry a load of fencing materials on Monday afternoon. The XL and XM Utes delivered exactly that. Simple, honest, and completely without pretension. Now here is what the collector market has figured out that the average person hasn't. First generation Australian Falcon Utes are genuinely rare. We are talking about vehicles that are 60 plus years old. Rust, neglect, accidents, and the simple passage of time have wiped out the vast majority of them. Finding an XL or XM Ute in restorable condition today is like finding a decent parking spot at Bunnings on a Saturday morning. Theoretically possible, practically a miracle. Documented, original, numbers matching examples in restorable condition are regularly trading between $25,000 and $50,000 right now, with fully restored Concours examples pushing well past that. And the trajectory is upward. Every year that passes, there are fewer of them. Every year that passes, there are more people who grew up watching their grandfather drive one and now have the financial means to go hunting. If you find an XL or XM Ute sitting in a shed somewhere, do not walk past it. Do not even jog past it. Stop. Look carefully. And then make an offer before the owner looks it up on the internet. Number 9. Holden HQ and HJ Kingswood Ute, 1971 to 1976. For roughly 3 decades, the HQ and HJ Kingswood Utes were the automotive equivalent of wallpaper. They were everywhere, they were ignored, and they were worth almost nothing. Farmers used them until they fell apart. Tradies threw tools in the back without a second thought. Kids used them as paddock bashers. The idea that anyone would one day pay serious collector money for a Kingswood Ute would have been genuinely laughable in the 1990s. Nobody is laughing now. The HQ series, introduced in 1971, represented a massive leap forward for Holden. New body, new suspension, new interior, and critically, the availability of the legendary Holden 350 cubic inch V8. The Kingswood Ute built on that platform is now one of the most actively traded classic Utes in the country, and the numbers being paid are escalating fast. Here is the thing about the HQ and HJ Ute that collectors understand. The body lines on these vehicles are genuinely beautiful. There is a reason the Holden design team from this era is still talked about with reverence. Long, clean flanks, a properly proportioned tray, and a front end that managed to look purposeful without being aggressive. These are vehicles that aged incredibly well. 6-cylinder manual examples in good condition are trading anywhere from $15,000 to $35,000 depending on condition and documentation. But the real money, the numbers that make people pull up a chair and lean in close, is in the V8 automatics. A numbers matching HQ or HJ Kingswood Ute with a 350 under the bonnet and documented history is a $50,000 vehicle right now, and possibly more if the right two buyers end up in the same room at the same auction, Paint and panel quality is everything in this segment. One panel off, and the whole thing loses serious value. Buyers are increasingly sophisticated and they are doing their homework before they open their wallets. Number 8. Ford Falcon XA and XB GT Ute, 1972 to 1976, right? Let's have an honest conversation about something that makes the purist deeply uncomfortable, but is absolutely central to understanding this part of the market. Ford never officially built a GT Ute. There is no factory paperwork, no build plate, no window sticker from Broadmeadows that says GT Ute. What Ford built was the XA and XB Falcon Ute. What the Australian public did was take that platform and create one of the most potent and culturally significant automotive legends this country has ever produced. The clone and tribute culture surrounding the XA and XB GT Ute is not a dirty secret. It is a legitimate and thriving part of the Australian collector market, and buyers need to understand the distinction clearly because the market prices these vehicles very differently depending on what they actually are. A correctly authenticated, properly built XA or XB Ute fitted with genuine GT running gear, the Cleveland V8, the appropriate transmission, correct trim, and verifiable component history is a serious collector vehicle. The fabrication and mechanical work alone on a correctly built example represents an enormous investment of skilled labor and genuine parts. These vehicles are trading between $60,000 and $120,000 depending on the quality of the build and the documentation trail. But here is where it gets complicated. The market is also full of cars that someone has stuck a GT badge on and called it a day. A vinyl stripe and a bonnet scoop do not make a GT Ute. Buyers are increasingly wise to this, and the gap between a correctly built tribute and a badge job is enormous in both quality and price. Before you hand over serious money for an XA or XB GT Ute, get an independent inspection from someone who knows this platform inside and out. The difference between a genuine piece of Australian muscle history and an elaborate costume party can cost you $30,000 if you get it wrong. That said, when they are right, when everything lines up and the build quality is there is almost nothing in the classic Australian Ute market that generates the same visceral emotional response. These things sound like a thunderstorm with a throttle cable, and that ultimately is why people keep paying for them. Number 7. Holden HQ Sandman Ute, 1974 to 1977. I want you to think about the most wildly optimistic, unashamedly fun, completely over-the-top thing that a mainstream Australian car manufacturer ever produced. Whatever you thought of, I can almost guarantee the Holden Sandman is more outrageous than that. Holden took the HQ platform, the same bones as the respectable Kingswood Ute we just talked about, and they handed it to the marketing department during what I can only describe as the most entertainingly reckless era in Australian automotive history. The result was the Sandman, factory-side stripes that looked like they were designed by someone who had just discovered airbrushing, velour interiors, optional surfboard racks, an entire identity built around the idea that work utes deserved to have a genuinely good time on the weekends. At the time, plenty of people thought it was ridiculous. History has an excellent sense of humor about these things. The Sandman badge on an HQ UT is not just a cosmetic option, it is a cultural artifact. It represents a specific and unrepeatable moment in Australian popular culture when the working vehicle and the recreational lifestyle vehicle collided head-on and produced something gloriously, unapologetically Australian. Collectors have figured this out in a major way. Genuine, documented Sandman Utes, and I want to emphasize the word genuine here because the reproduction decal industry is thriving for exactly the wrong reasons, are trading between $45,000 and $90,000. The higher end of that range is reserved for V8 examples with verifiable factory Sandman identification, correct interior, and solid body condition. A pristine, numbers-matching Sandman Ute with documented history, and the right optioning is genuinely approaching six figures in the current market. The trap in this segment, and it is a significant trap, is fake Sandmans. Because the badge and the stripes are both reproducible, there is a steady supply of standard Kingswood Utes wearing Sandman costumes. The authentic identification points are in the build plate and the compliance documentation. If a seller cannot produce paperwork that confirms Sandman specification from the factory, walk away. There are enough legitimate Sandman hunters in this country to keep the fraudulent ones honest, but only if buyers do their due diligence. Number 6. Ford Falcon XC Cobra Ute, 1976 to 1979. Here is one that even a lot of genuine enthusiasts glaze over for a second before it registers, the XC Cobra, and when it registers, the response is always the same. Oh, right. The Cobra? Yes, the Cobra. Ford Australia introduced the Cobra package in 1976 on the XC Falcon, and they did it with a sense of purpose that the modern marketing department at any major manufacturer would find completely alien. This was not a graphic package dreamed up to shift slow-moving stock. This was a legitimate, low-production, high-performance specification built on the XC platform with a specific engine tune, a distinctive twin-stripe graphics treatment, and a deliberate positioning as Ford's answer to the muscle-era enthusiast. Production numbers on the XC Cobra Ute are low. Exactly how low is a subject of ongoing research and some healthy debate among the people who dedicate serious time to this, but the consensus sits well under 400 units. When you are talking about a vehicle that was produced in numbers that small, in a country that treated working utes the way Australia did through the 1980s and 90s, meaning hard work, salt air, and zero sentimentality, the survival rate of genuine examples is not high. And that rarity is now doing exactly what rarity always does to price. Authenticated XC Cobra Utes, and authentication is everything in this segment because the stripe kit was available as a dealer accessory, meaning the market has to navigate a minefield of genuine Cobras versus dealer option lookalikes, are now trading in the range of $70,000 to well over $100,000 for the best examples. The people who own them know exactly what they have. The people who are hunting them are prepared to travel interstate and write significant checks to secure them. If you have one or know someone who does, I would encourage an urgent conversation with a specialist auction house, because the window for maximizing value in this market is open right now, and these windows do not stay open forever. Number 5, Holden HZ 1-tonner, 1977 to 1980. Let's talk about the 1-tonner, because the 1-tonner exists in a slightly different space in the collector market, and it is one of the most interesting stories in this entire countdown. Holden built the 1-tonner on the HQ through HZ platform as a genuine commercial workhorse, higher payload rating, reinforced chassis, heavier duty rear suspension. These were trucks in the truest sense of the word. They went to farms and building sites and panel beating shops, and they were worked, genuinely and mercilessly worked for decades. But somewhere along the line, the custom car and resto mod community in Australia discovered something about the 1-tonner that changed its trajectory permanently. The platform is an extraordinary canvas. The longer wheelbase, the heavier duty underpinnings, and the wide availability of HQ through HZ running gear means that the 1-tonner has become the vehicle of choice for serious custom builders. And when serious custom builders get involved with a platform, two things happen simultaneously. The quality of what is being produced on that platform goes through the roof, and the price of good raw examples to build from follows right behind it. Clean, unmodified, original 1-tonners in restorable condition are now between $20,000 and $45,000. And a correctly and tastefully resto-modded example, one with a modern LS engine, upgraded brakes and suspension, quality paintwork, and a well-executed interior, is a $60,000 to $80,000 vehicle without breaking a sweat. The very best custom 1-tonners built by the top names in the Australian hot rod and custom scene, are pushing six figures. The fascinating thing about this segment is that the value is being driven from two completely different directions at once. Traditional restorers want unmodified originals to bring back to factory specification. The custom and resto mod crowd want the same cars as blank canvases. Both groups are competing for the same diminishing pool of quality raw material. That is a textbook supply squeeze, and the price chart reflects it perfectly. Number 4. Holden HQ Monaro GTS Ute conversion right. I need to stop here and address something directly because this entry is going to raise some eyebrows and I want to get in front of it immediately. The factory never built a Monaro Ute, that is a fact. Holden built the Monaro as a coupe and the Kingswood and one tonner as the Ute derivatives of the HQ platform, but the words Monaro and Ute were never combined on a factory build sheet. However, in the Australian custom car world, the Monaro Ute conversion has become one of the most coveted and respected custom builds in the entire collector market. And I am putting it in this countdown because the prices being paid for correctly executed examples are genuinely significant. Here is the logic, and it makes complete sense once you understand the platform. The Monaro GTS 350 used the same basic HQ architecture as the Kingswood Ute. Skilled fabricators, the real ones, not the blokes who watched 3 YouTube videos and bought a welder, have been creating Monaro Ute conversions for decades. The best of these are extraordinary pieces of craftsmanship, Monaro front clip and interior, custom fabricated Ute tub, GTS 350 drivetrain, and execution at a level that makes it genuinely difficult to believe it did not roll out of Elizabeth in this configuration. The collector market has not just accepted these builds, in many cases it is actively pursuing them. A correctly built, professionally executed Monaro Ute conversion with documented fabrication history and quality running gear is a $80,000 to $120,000 vehicle right now. And the reason is simple, these are one-of-a-kind objects. No two are identical. They represent the absolute pinnacle of Australian custom car fabrication skill, and the people who build them at this level are not young. When the master fabricators who produce work at this standard are gone, they are gone. If you see a clean, professionally built Monaro Ute conversion, understand what you are looking at. You are looking at something that will never be cheaper than it is today. Number 3. Ford Falcon GTHO Phase 3 Tribute Ute. The GTHO Phase 3 is the most famous car ever built in Australia. Full stop, end of sentence, no debate required. The fastest 4-door production car in the world when it was released in 1971. The subject of a parliamentary panic so severe that the government nearly banned high-performance cars entirely in this country. A vehicle so culturally significant that genuine examples, when they surface, generate the kind of media attention usually reserved for natural disasters and federal elections. And yes, the GTHO was a sedan, but what the GTHO legend has done for the tribute and clone ute market in Australia is something that deserves serious attention because the ripple effect of that Phase 3 mythology has created an entire collector ecosystem around the XY-based Ute platform. The XY Falcon Ute shares its bones with the car that broke the 170 km/h barrier at Bathurst and terrified politicians in Canberra. Builders who understand this have been creating GTHO specification tribute Utes on the XY platform for the better part of 4 decades, and the best of them are extraordinary. A correctly built XY GTHO tribute Ute is not something you put together on a Sunday afternoon. We are talking about genuine Cleveland V8 engines, correct close ratio top-loader 4-speed gearboxes, authentic GTHO suspension specifications, and bodywork executed to a standard that stands up to serious scrutiny. The fabrication and parts cost alone on a properly built example is eye-watering. The market for quality XY tribute Utes is currently between $70,000 and $130,000 for the best examples. And here is the thing that most people get wrong about this segment. The buyers are not being fooled into thinking they are buying a genuine Phase 3 sedan in Ute form. There is no such thing, and everyone knows it. They are buying the Tribute because it is a legitimate collector vehicle in its own right, a hand-built piece of Australian automotive culture that celebrates the most significant performance era this country ever produced. That is not a consolation prize, that is a completely legitimate reason to write a very large check. Number 2, Ford Falcon GTGS Ute and XW GT Ute replica. Here is where I need you to really pay attention, because this entry sits in a specific and nuanced part of the market that is genuinely misunderstood, and that misunderstanding is costing buyers money on both sides of the transaction. The XW Falcon GT was the car that announced Ford's serious intentions in the Australian performance market. 1969 wins a V8, the beginning of the genuine GTHO story, and the XW platform Ute has become a collector vehicle of real significance, both as a restored original and as the foundation for GT specification Tribute builds. What separates the XW Ute discussion from some of the other entries in this countdown is the availability of legitimate factory GT specification component sets. Unlike some of the other platforms we have talked about, the XW era left behind a documented parts trail that skilled restorers can follow, genuine GT engine identification, correct transmission castings, authentic suspension components. When these pieces come together on an XW Ute, the result is a vehicle that the collector market prices with genuine seriousness. Documented, well-presented XW GT replica Utes, with a clear, honest history of what they are, meaning high-quality replicas, not fraudulent claims of factory provenance, are trading between $80,000 and $150,000 at serious auction. The condition of the body, the authenticity of the drivetrain components, and the quality of the documentation supporting the build are the three variables that move the needle most significantly. I will say this plainly because it needs to be said. The XW UT segment has attracted some operators who are less interested in accurate Tribute builds than they are in misrepresenting what they have to uninformed buyers. If you are spending serious money in this space, engage a specialist with direct XW experience before you commit. The cost of a proper pre-purchase inspection in this price bracket is completely irrelevant against the cost of getting it wrong. The legitimate, correctly presented, properly built examples in this segment are genuinely magnificent vehicles. They deserve the prices they are commanding. Just make sure what you are buying is actually one of them. Number 1, early Holden FJ Ute, 1953 to 1956. And here we are. Number 1. The vehicle that stops conversations at shows, that makes hardened collectors go completely quiet, and that represents the absolute foundation stone of everything the Australian Ute identity was ever built on. The Holden FJ Ute, 1953 to 1956. The second generation of Australia's own car. Built at the Fisherman's Bend plant in Melbourne and at Elizabeth in South Australia. Designed for Australian conditions by people who understood them, and sold to Australian families who needed a vehicle that could do everything, carry everyone, and keep going no matter what. Let me give you a moment to appreciate the historical weight of what we are talking about here. When the FJ Holden was being built, Australia was a fundamentally different country. The Korean War had just ended, television had not yet arrived, the Snowy Mountains scheme was in full swing, and the FJ Holden Ute was the vehicle that carried the tools, the materials, the livestock, and the families that were building this nation in the most literal possible sense. There is no Australian vehicle with a stronger emotional connection to the national story than the early Holden Utes. Not the XY Falcon, not the Sandman, not the Land Cruiser. The FJ Ute sits in a category entirely by itself because it was here first, it was genuinely Australian, and it served this country with a reliability and durability that its builders had every right to be proud of. The collector market has understood this for a long time, but the prices have been accelerating sharply in recent years, and the trajectory shows no sign of reversing. Here is what the market looks like right now. A Project FJ Ute, meaning a complete but unrestored vehicle requiring significant work, is selling between $20,000 and $40,000. And I want you to think about that for a second. A vehicle requiring tens of thousands of dollars in restoration work is already selling for $20,000 as a starting point. That is how strong the underlying demand is. A well-presented, driver quality restored FJ Ute is $50,000 to $75,000, and a concours level, show quality restoration with documented history, correct paint codes, authenticated components, and professional standard bodywork is a six-figure vehicle, $100,000, sometimes more, depending on the provenance of the specific example and the reputation of the restorer. But here is the entry that really makes the market pay attention. The genuinely rare FJ Utes, meaning vehicles with documented single-family ownership history, original drivetrain, unrestored but well-preserved examples, with honest patina rather than neglect. These are becoming almost impossible to price because there is no ceiling on what the right buyer will pay when the right car comes along at the right moment. I spoke recently with a collector who has been in this market for over 30 years. He said something that I think is the single most important thing anyone can say about where the classic Australian ute market is heading. He said the FJ Utes are not a car anymore, they are Australian history, and people are beginning to value them the same way they value other irreplaceable pieces of national heritage. He is right, and if you have one, or if your grandfather had one that has been sitting under a tarpaulin in a shed somewhere since 1984, I would strongly suggest that you treat that vehicle with the same care and seriousness you would apply to any significant financial asset, because that is exactly what it is. Let me bring this home with something important, because there is a real danger in a market moving this fast and attracting this level of money, and that danger is fraud. The classic Australian ute market is full of legitimate, passionate, knowledgeable people, collectors who have spent decades studying these vehicles, learning the authentic identification points, understanding the documentation trails, and paying fair money for genuine pieces of Australian automotive history. These people are the backbone of the market, and they are the reason its reputation is as solid as it is. But fast-moving money attracts the wrong kind of attention. The replica decal industry is thriving, VIN plate fraud is a documented reality, badge swapping, platform misrepresentation, and creative storytelling around provenance are all active problems in this segment right now. The price gap between an authenticated, genuine vehicle and a well-presented fake is enormous, which means the financial incentive to create a well-presented fake is also enormous. The rules for protecting yourself are simple and non-negotiable. Never buy a significant classic ute without an independent inspection by a specialist who has verifiable experience with that specific model. Never accept provenance documentation at face value without cross-referencing it against the vehicle identification points, and never let urgency or emotion override due diligence. The right car will still be the right car after you have taken 3 days to do your homework properly. If a seller is pressuring you to decide before you are ready, that pressure is telling you something important. The classic Australian ute market is one of the most exciting collector vehicle markets operating in this country right now. The combination of genuine scarcity, deep cultural significance, and a growing community of serious buyers is creating price appreciation that is real, sustained, and not going away anytime soon. These vehicles are not coming back. The factories that built them are closed. The era that produced them is finished. What exists today is all there will ever be. And while everyone else is arguing about which $80,000 new ute has the best tow rating and how long before the DPF chokes itself to death, the smart money is sitting in climate-controlled sheds across this country under custom-fitted covers slowly and quietly going up in value every single year. Pay attention to this market. It rewards the people who do.